Hi, I'm Cameron Steele. My brother called me at midnight. I'm marrying your ex tomorrow. You lose again. No apology, no hesitation, just pure arrogance wrapped in a smug phone call. She'd drained our joint savings. He was already planning to move into the beach house my grandfather left me. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply said, "Thanks for the warning." Because some battles aren't won with fists or shouting. They're won with patience, precision, and preparation. When you're 10 steps ahead, revenge becomes unnecessary. Justice becomes inevitable. Want to know how I dismantled their entire plan using nothing but paperwork, timing, and the truth? Let me show you. This isn't about getting even. This is about protecting what's rightfully yours when the people closest to you decide you're too weak to fight back. Spoiler, I wasn't weak. I was strategic. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The call came at 11:53 p.m. I was sitting in my home office in Clearwater Bay, going through quarterly reports for the architecture firm I'd built from scratch over the last 8 years. The desk lamp cast a warm glow over blueprints and sketches scattered across the mahogany surface. Outside, the ocean whispered against the rocks below, a sound that usually brought me peace. My phone lit up with his name, Brody, my younger brother. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in 4 months. Not since Thanksgiving dinner, when he made some comment about how I always played it too safe and never took real risks. Coming from someone who'd bounced between startup ideas like a pinball, it stung more than I wanted to admit. But something made me pick up. Maybe instinct. Maybe curiosity. Cameron. His voice came through, bright and buzzing with that particular brand of excitement he got when he thought he'd won something. Just wanted to give you a heads up, man. I'm marrying Autumn tomorrow. Yeah, you're Autumn. Well, I guess she's mine now. I sat back in my chair. The leather creaked softly. My hand, still holding a red pen I'd been using to mark up a proposal, stayed perfectly steady. You there? He pressed, and I could hear the grin in his voice. I know it's sudden, but when you know, right? We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. She finally told me everything. About how you were always working, never present, treating her like some accessory to your perfect little life. She deserves better, Cam. She deserves someone who actually sees her. 6 months. I did the math quickly. That meant they started whatever this was in April. Right around the time she suddenly became obsessed with hot yoga classes 3 towns over. Classes that somehow always ran late. Anyway, Brody continued, filling my silence with his usual rambling. The wedding's at noon tomorrow, at some boutique chapel in Silver Pine Grove. Small thing, just close friends. I figured you'd want to know. No hard feelings, yeah? You lose some, you win some, or in your case, you lose again. That last part. That little dig. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. Growing up, everything between us had been a competition he created in his head. Who got better grades? Who made the varsity team first? Who Dad praised at dinner? I stopped playing that game years ago. Apparently he never did. Thanks for the warning, I said calmly, evenly, like he'd just told me about a change in weather patterns. There was a pause. He'd expected something else. Anger, maybe. Pleading. Some kind of emotional breakdown he could laugh about later with his friends. That's it, he asked, confused now. Just thanks for the warning? What else would you like me to say, Brody? I don't know, man. I thought you'd at least be upset. You were with her for 3 years. I hope you both are very happy, I replied, and I meant it in the way you mean things that sound polite but carry a different weight underneath. Enjoy your day tomorrow. I hung up before he could respond. For a long moment, I just sat there, phone face down on the desk, staring at the architectural rendering of a commercial complex I'd been working on for months. Clean lines. Solid foundation, everything calculated, measured, intentional. That's how I built things, that's how I lived. Autumn, God, I'd loved her once. Maybe I still did in that faded, habitual way you love old songs you've heard too many times. We met at a gallery opening in downtown Clearwater Bay. She was magnetic, the kind of woman who walked into a room and shifted the gravity. We dated for 8 months before moving in together, and for a while, everything felt right. But she wanted more attention, more spontaneity, more grand gestures, and I gave her stability, security, a partnership. Apparently that wasn't enough. I opened my laptop and logged into the banking app. Our joint account, the one we'd opened 2 years ago when we started talking about buying property together, showed a balance of $947. Last week, it had $63,000. I pulled up the transaction history, multiple transfers, all to an account I didn't recognize. 4 large withdrawals at different branches across 2 states. The most recent one happened this morning at 10:17 a.m. in Silver Pine Grove. She'd been planning this, and she'd been sloppy about covering her tracks. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. My chest didn't tighten, my hands didn't shake. What I felt was something colder, sharper. Clarity. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, drank it slowly while looking out at the dark ocean. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Her things were still here. A yoga mat leaning against the hallway closet. Her favorite mug on the drying rack. A half-read novel on the coffee table with a bookmark shaped like a feather. She hadn't officially moved out. She'd just stopped coming home. I returned to my office and opened the filing cabinet in the corner. 3rd drawer down, behind tax documents and property deeds, was a manila folder I'd started keeping about 8 months ago. Not out of paranoia. Out of diligence. Inside were printed bank statements, screenshots of odd text exchanges, receipts from places she said she'd never been, a timeline I'd been quietly constructing. Not because I wanted to catch her, but because something in my gut told me to pay attention. There were photos, too. Her car parked outside a condo complex I didn't recognize. A dinner reservation confirmation she claimed was for a work event but was listed under a name that wasn't hers. Little things that individually meant nothing. Together they formed a pattern. I wasn't surprised she cheated. I was surprised it was with Brody. That part landed differently. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a statement. She didn't just leave me. She left me for the person who'd spent his entire life trying to prove he was better than me. I added tonight's phone call to the timeline. Documented the date, the time, his exact words as best I could remember. Then I logged the account activity, printed the transactions, and clipped everything together. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hope you're not too heartbroken. He's better for me anyway. You were always too boring. Too predictable. Thanks for the savings, though. Wedding dress wasn't cheap. I stared at the message, read it twice. Then I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence, and set the phone back down. Boring. Predictable. The same word she'd used 6 months ago, during an argument about vacation plans. I'd wanted to stay home and finish a project. She wanted to fly to Ibiza on a whim. You're like a robot sometimes, Cameron, she'd said, frustrated, pacing the living room in those expensive leggings she bought, but never actually wore to the gym. You plan everything to death. When was the last time you did something spontaneous? I didn't answer then. I didn't argue. I just watched her throw her hands up and storm out to meet friends for drinks. Now I knew which friend. I opened a fresh document on my laptop and started typing. Not angry, not frantic, just factual. Timeline of financial discrepancies and relationship irregularities. I worked until 3:47 a.m. cataloging everything. Every withdrawal she made without discussing it. Every lie she told that I'd quietly verified. Every instance where her story didn't match reality. By the time I finished, the document was 11 pages long. I saved it, backed it up to 3 separate drives, and emailed a copy to myself. Then I walked to the bedroom, looked at the side of the bed she used to sleep on. The sheets were still unmade from the last time she'd been here, whenever that was. I couldn't even remember. I stripped the bed, threw the sheets in the wash, remade it with fresh ones. When I finally lay down, the sky outside was starting to lighten. I didn't feel tired. I felt awake in a way I hadn't been in months. Tomorrow they'd get married. They'd smile for photos. They'd celebrate what they thought was a victory. And I'd be 10 steps ahead, just like always. Because boring and predictable isn't a weakness when you're building a case. It's a strategy. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. with the kind of clarity that only comes after a full collapse and rebuild of your understanding of reality. The sun was already streaming through the curtains, painting gold stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat up, ran a hand through my hair, and immediately reached for my phone. 17 missed calls, 12 from Autumn's friends, 3 from my mother, 2 from Brody's best man, a guy named Trevor I'd met twice and didn't particularly like. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. None from Autumn herself. Interesting. I ignored them all. Instead, I showered, dressed in a plain gray Henley and jeans, made a pot of coffee, and sat down at my desk with a notepad and the checklist I'd drafted in my head somewhere between 4 a.m. and falling asleep. First item, secure all shared assets. I logged into the joint account again, still showing that pathetic $947 balance. I transferred it into my personal account, then closed the joint account entirely. The system prompted me with a warning about needing both account holders to authorize closure. I clicked through anyway. Turns out when one person drains an account to near zero and the other person has all the original opening documents, banks tend to side with the responsible party. Done. One down. Next, I opened our shared cloud storage, photos, documents, everything we'd accumulated as a couple. I downloaded every file that was mine or involved my personal assets, the house deed, my business documents, photos from before we met. Then I removed her access entirely. Changed the password, set up two-factor authentication. She'd still have her own copies of the photos, the selfies, the vacation snapshots, but she wouldn't have access to anything that mattered. I moved on to subscriptions. Streaming services, meal kits, that premium meditation app she swore she used but never opened. Everything was under my card. I canceled her profiles, removed her devices, updated passwords. It felt mechanical, like I was debugging a program removing corrupted files one by one. By 8:15 a.m., I'd locked down every digital connection we shared. Bank accounts, cloud storage, subscriptions, even the smart home system. I changed the code to the front door, adjusted the security camera settings so I'd get alerts if anyone approached the property. Then I called my lawyer. Douglas Brennan had handled the purchase of my house and the formation of my business. He was in his early 60s, sharp as a knife, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Cameron, he answered on the second ring, bit early for a social call. Not social, I said. I need to protect my assets. My girlfriend of 3 years has been funneling money out of our joint account. She's marrying my brother today. I need to make sure she can't touch anything else. There was a pause, not shock. Douglas didn't do shock, just calculation. How much did she take? About $62,000. Do you have documentation? Every transaction, every date, screenshots, timestamps, I can send it now. Do that. I'll review and call you back within the hour. In the meantime, don't communicate with her directly. Don't post anything on social media. Don't do anything that could be used to paint you as retaliatory or unstable. Understood. I hung up and emailed him the 11-page document I'd compiled, along with all the supporting screenshots and bank records. Then I made another call. My business partner, Isaac Delgado. We'd started the firm together right out of grad school, and if there was anyone I trusted with the operational side of things, it was him. Cam, what's up? His voice was casual, relaxed. It was Saturday. He was probably having breakfast with his wife and twin daughters. I need you to review all our business accounts and make sure Autumn doesn't have access to anything. She was listed as an emergency contact on a few vendor accounts. I need her removed. Isaac didn't ask questions. That's what I appreciated about him. He just said, give me 2 hours. I'll handle it. Thanks. I hung up and stared at the list I'd made. Everything was getting checked off faster than I'd anticipated. But there was one more thing. The house. This place, perched on the cliffs overlooking the bay, had been my grandfather's. He'd left it to me when I was 25, right after I graduated. It was paid off, fully in my name, no mortgage, no co-ownership. Autumn had never been on the deed, but she'd lived here for over 2 years. Depending on the state laws, that could complicate things. I called Douglas back. Already? He answered. One more thing. The house. She's been living here for 2 years, but she's not on the deed. Can she claim any right to it? In this state? Not unless you're married, or she can prove she contributed financially to its maintenance in a significant way. Do you have records showing you paid all the utilities, property taxes, upkeep? Everything. It's all auto-drafted from my personal account. Then you're fine. If she tries to claim anything, we'll bury her in documentation. Send me those records too. I did. Another email sent. Another vulnerability sealed. By 10 a.m. my phone started ringing again. This time it was my mother. I almost didn't answer. But ignoring her would only make things worse. Cameron Joseph Steele. She started, using my full name like I was 12 years old again. Brody told me you hung up on him last night. What is going on? He called to tell me he's marrying Autumn today. Silence. Then, quieter. He's what? Marrying Autumn. My girlfriend. Or ex-girlfriend, I suppose. Apparently they've been seeing each other for 6 months. Cameron, She sounded genuinely stunned. I had no idea. He didn't say anything. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. Really? Fine. Your brother is marrying your girlfriend and you're fine? What would you like me to do? Show up and object? Make a scene? That's not who I am. She sighed, that long, tired sigh she'd perfected over years of mediating between Brody and me. No, you've never been one for scenes. But, sweetheart, it's okay to be upset. I know, and I will be, later. Right now, I have things to handle. Like what? Like making sure she doesn't take anything else from me. Another pause. Then, softer, she took money. $62,000 from our joint account. Oh, Cameron, her voice cracked slightly. I'm so sorry. It's fine. I'm handling it. I have a lawyer. I have documentation. I'll be okay. Do you want me to talk to Brody? No, let him have his day. He thinks he won something. Let him enjoy it. She didn't argue. We said goodbye, and I set the phone down just as it buzzed again. Douglas. Cameron, I reviewed everything you sent. You have an airtight case for financial recovery. She drained a joint account without notice, used the funds for personal expenses unrelated to shared responsibilities, and you have a clear paper trail. We can file a civil suit for recovery of funds. It won't be fast, but we'll get your money back. How long? 4 to 8 months, depending on how cooperative she is. But here's the thing. If she's getting married today and didn't disclose this debt to your brother, that's fraud, especially if they're filing joint taxes or opening joint accounts. I leaned back in my chair, something clicking into place. So if she's hiding this from him too, then she's setting him up to inherit her legal mess. And if he's as impulsive as you've implied, he probably hasn't done his due diligence. I almost smiled. Almost. File the paperwork, I said. Let's start the process. Will do. I'll have the initial documents drafted by Monday. We hung up. I looked at the clock. 11:42 a.m. In 18 minutes they'd be at the chapel. She'd be in some dress she bought with my money. Brody would be grinning like he'd just won the lottery. And I'd be here, systematically dismantling every assumption they'd made about me. Let them think I was boring, predictable, too passive to fight back. By the time they realized I'd been fighting all along, it would already be over. I made myself a sandwich, poured another cup of coffee, sat on the back deck overlooking the ocean. The water was calm today, glassy, perfect. I took a bite of the sandwich and watched a sailboat drift past in the distance. Somewhere in Silver Pine Grove they were saying vows. Here in Clearwater Bay I was building a fortress, and I didn't need to throw a single punch to do it. By early afternoon I found myself walking through the house like I was seeing it for the first time. Every room held some fragment of her, a scarf draped over the stair railing, a pair of running shoes by the door she bought but wore exactly twice, a stack of interior design magazines on the coffee table she swore she'd use for inspiration but never opened. It wasn't anger I felt, it was something quieter, like watching a movie you'd already seen and finally noticing all the plot holes. I ended up in the guest bedroom, the one she'd converted into her creative space about a year ago. There was an easel in the corner with a half-finished painting, an abstract piece with lots of blues and grays. She'd told me it represented emotional depth. I'd nodded and said it was beautiful, even though I didn't really understand it. Now, looking at it, I realized it was unfinished, because she'd never actually cared about finishing it. It was a prop. Something to point to when she wanted to seem deep and artistic. I sat down on the small love seat she'd insisted we buy for this room. I need a space that's just mine, she'd said. At the time, I thought it was healthy. Now I wondered if it was just the first step in separating herself from me entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaac. All vendor accounts updated. Autumn removed from emergency contacts. Also found something weird. She was listed as a reference on a credit application for some boutique in Silver Pine Grove. Thought you should know. I stared at that message. A credit application using me as a reference. For a business I'd never heard of. I texted back, "Can you send me the details?" 3 minutes later, a forwarded email appeared. It was from a commercial lender, dated 6 weeks ago. The application was for a $75,000 line of credit to open a high-end wellness studio. The applicant was listed as Autumn Freeman and Brody Steele, co-owners. My stomach dropped, not from shock, from recognition. They'd been planning this for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. I scrolled through the application. Under financial references, my name appeared, along with my business information and personal assets. They'd used my credibility, my stability to secure funding for their joint venture. And I'd had no idea. I stood up and paced the room, my mind replaying the last few months and fast forward, all those late nights she said she was at yoga. The weekend trips to visit her sister in Silver Pine Grove, a sister I'd never met and who apparently didn't exist. The sudden interest in business podcasts and entrepreneurship books. She wasn't just cheating, she was building an exit plan, and she was using me as the foundation. I sat back down and opened my laptop. A quick search for Wellness Studio Silver Pine Grove brought up a coming soon page for a place called Ember and Oak Wellness. The website was sleek, minimalist, all earth tones and soft lighting. The About page featured 2 headshots, Autumn and Brody, both smiling, both looking like they'd just discovered the secret to enlightenment. The bio read, founded by siblings in spirit Autumn Freeman and Brody Steele, Ember and Oak is a sanctuary for those seeking balance, growth, and transformation. Siblings in spirit. I almost laughed. The launch date was set for next month. They already had a mailing list sign-up and a social media presence with over 2,000 followers. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated. I leaned back and closed my eyes, thinking back to the early days. We met at a gallery opening. She'd been standing in front of a sculpture, tilting her head like she was trying to decode it. I'd walked over, made some comment about the artist's use of negative space. She'd smiled and said, "Finally, someone who actually gets it." That smile, God, that smile had felt like sunlight. We'd gone for coffee afterward. Talked for 3 hours about art, architecture, life. She told me she'd moved to Clearwater Bay to escape a toxic relationship and start fresh. I told her about losing my grandfather and inheriting the house. We bonded over new beginnings. Looking back now, I wondered how much of that conversation had been genuine and how much had been an audition. How much of what she told me was designed to mirror what I wanted to hear. 3 months in, she moved into the house. It felt natural, easy. She fit into my life like she'd always been there. But there were moments, small ones I brushed off at the time. Like the way she'd go silent whenever I talked about long-term plans. Or how she'd change the subject when I mentioned updating my will to include her. Or the time I suggested we open a joint account and she'd been almost too eager, pushing for a higher initial deposit than I'd planned. I remembered one night about a year ago we were having dinner at this Italian place downtown. She was scrolling through her phone, half listening as I talked about a new project at work. I'd stopped mid-sentence and asked, "Are you happy?" She'd looked up, startled. "What? Yeah, of course. Why? You just seem distracted lately." She'd reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, work has been crazy. But I'm happy, Cam, really." I'd believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. Now I wondered if that was around the time she'd met Brody. If maybe she'd already been planning her escape and was just biding time. My phone rang. Douglas again. "Cameron, I have an update. I did some digging into this wellness studio situation. The loan application you forwarded lists both Autumn and your brother as co-applicants, but the collateral listed includes assets that don't belong to either of them." "What kind of assets?" "Your house, for one, and your business." I froze. "How is that possible?" "They forged your signature on a document claiming you were a silent investor. It's fraud, Cameron. Clear-cut financial fraud." My jaw tightened. "What do we do?" "We report it. I'll contact the lender and the authorities. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is criminal." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Do it." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the guest room, staring at that unfinished painting. The blues and gray suddenly felt less like emotional depth and more like smoke and mirrors. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd tried to bury me. And the worst part, the part that actually stung, was that I'd made it so easy I'd trusted her. Given her access, believed her when she said she loved me. I thought about Brody, my little brother, the one I used to give my Halloween candy to because he'd eaten all of his in one night, the one I helped move into his first apartment, the one I lent $5,000 to when his last startup failed, money he never paid back. And this was how he repaid me, by taking the woman I loved and using my name to fund their new life together. I stood up and walked to the window. The ocean was still calm. A few surfers bobbed in the distance, waiting for waves that weren't coming. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, started typing. Things I ignored. The way she stopped asking about my day, how she flinched when I touched her shoulder, the new password on her phone, girls, nights that lasted until 3 a.m., the gym membership she never used, how she stopped talking about the future. The list went on. 23 items by the time I finished. 23 red flags I'd explained away because I wanted to believe in us. I saved the note and titled it Lessons Learned. Then I walked downstairs, made myself dinner, and ate it slowly, deliberately, while looking out at the sunset. They were probably at their reception now, toasting, laughing, celebrating. And I was here, cataloging their crimes. Some people would call that sad. I called it preparation. Because the truth always comes out eventually. And when it did, I'd be ready. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected violence. Not physical, but the kind that comes through a phone screen at 7:23 a.m. when you're still half asleep. 3 sharp knocks on my door pulled me from a dreamless sleep. I sat up, disoriented for a moment, then checked my phone. Multiple missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, a string of texts from Isaac telling me not to answer the door without a lawyer present. Too late for that advice. I pulled on a shirt and walked downstairs. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could make out 2 figures. Official postures. The kind of stance that comes with a badge. I opened the door to find 2 police officers on my porch. One was older, maybe mid-50s, with gray threading through his dark hair. The other was younger, a woman with sharp eyes that were already cataloging everything behind me. "Cameron Steele?" the older officer asked. "That's me. I'm Detective Morrison, this is Detective Chen. We'd like to ask you some questions about a report filed yesterday evening. May we come in?" I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." They declined. We stood in an awkward triangle near the couch, none of us sitting. Detective Chen pulled out a small tablet. "Mr. Steele, we received a report from an Autumn Freeman claiming you've engaged in financial coercion, harassment, and unlawful restriction of shared assets. She says you locked her out of accounts without warning and have made threats regarding her safety." I felt my expression go flat, not from surprise, from recognition. Of course she'd strike first, make herself the victim before I could establish the truth. "That's interesting," I said calmly, "considering she drained our joint account of $62,000, used my identity fraudulently on a business loan application, and married my brother yesterday while still having legal obligations to our shared assets." Detective Morrison's eyebrow raised slightly. "You have documentation of this?" "Every transaction, every forged signature, every fraudulent claim. Would you like to see it now, or should I have my lawyer present it formally?" The 2 detectives exchanged a glance. Something shifted in the air. This wasn't the conversation they'd expected to have. "If you have evidence readily available, we'd like to see it," Detective Chen said, her tone more neutral now. I walked to my office and returned with the binder I'd been building, navy blue, organized with tabs and timestamps. I set it on the coffee table and opened it to the first section. This is the joint account history. You can see here that starting 4 months ago, there were irregular withdrawals, always just under $10,000 to avoid automatic reporting flags. Here are the transfers to an account under her name only. Total amount removed, $62,318. I flipped to the next section. This is the loan application for Ember and Oak Wellness Studio. My name, my business, and my property are listed as collateral and references. This is my signature on file with my bank. This is the signature on the loan document. You can see they don't match. Detective Morrison leaned in closer, studying both signatures. "And here," I continued, turning to another tabbed section, "are the text messages from her phone number. Timestamps match the withdrawals. She was coordinating with my brother throughout. Here's one from 6 weeks ago where she specifically mentions needing to move money before I noticed." I let them read in silence. Detective Chen photographed several pages with her phone. Morrison pulled out a notepad and started writing. "Mr. Steele," Chen finally said, "these are serious allegations. Have you filed a formal report?" "My attorney is preparing the paperwork. We were planning to file tomorrow morning." "And the threats she mentioned? Have you contacted her since learning about the marriage?" "I haven't contacted her at all. The only communication was a text she sent me, unsolicited, which I also documented. No threats, no harassment, just silence." I pulled out my phone, showed them the message thread. The only texts were from her, gloating about the wedding, thanking me for the savings. My responses were non-existent. Morrison nodded slowly. "This changes the complexion of the complaint significantly." "I understand she has a right to make a report," I said. "I'm not trying to interfere with that process. I'm simply providing context." Detective Chen closed her tablet. "We'll need to take copies of this documentation, for our records and for the DA's office. If what you're showing us is accurate, and we'll verify it, then Ms. Freeman may be facing charges of her own. I can provide copies now. I also have digital versions I can email. Both would be helpful." I spent the next 20 minutes making copies, sending files, answering their questions, with the same level factual tone I'd use in a business meeting. No emotion, no editorializing, just data. When they finally left, Detective Morrison paused at the door. "Mr. Steele, off the record? You might want to consider a restraining order. People who go this far to paint themselves as victims often escalate when that narrative gets challenged. I'll discuss it with my attorney." They left. I closed the door and stood in the entryway for a long moment, listening to my own breathing. She'd tried to have me arrested, or at minimum investigated. Tried to create a paper trail that made me look like an abuser, a controller, someone dangerous. If I hadn't been documenting everything, if I hadn't stayed calm and methodical, that narrative might have stuck. My phone rang. "Douglas." "Cameron, I just got a very interesting call from the Clearwater Bay Police Department." "Let me guess. They wanted to verify my story?" "They did. And I provided additional documentation from my end. The financial records I've been reviewing, the timeline of events, the loan fraud. They're taking this seriously." She tried to get ahead of it, I said, make herself look like the victim before anyone could question her. Classic preemptive strike. But it backfired. Because you were prepared. I walked to the kitchen and poured water into a glass I didn't remember getting. "What happens now?" "Now the police investigate both claims. Hers against you, which will likely be dismissed given the evidence, and the fraud case, which will move forward regardless of whether you press charges personally. The bank will want to prosecute, so will the loan company. And Brody? If he knowingly participated in the fraud, he's equally liable. If he was duped, he's a victim too, though that won't help their marriage much." After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing in particular. The house felt different now. Not violated exactly, but exposed. Like someone had tried to break in and failed. But the attempt itself left marks. Around noon, my phone started buzzing with texts from people I hadn't heard from in months. Mutual friends, colleagues, even a few distant relatives. Most of them had the same general message. "Heard what happened. Are you okay?" News had traveled fast. Small community, smaller social circles. I responded to a few with brief, polite messages. "I'm fine. Thank you for checking in." But one message stood out. It was from Valerie Kim, Autumn's best friend. Or former best friend, I supposed. "Cameron, I need to talk to you. Call me when you can. It's important." I stared at that message for a long time before deciding to call. She answered immediately. "Cameron, thank God, I've been trying to figure out how to reach you." "What's going on, Valerie?" "I just found out about the wedding yesterday. She didn't tell me. Didn't invite me. I had to see it on social media. And when I called to ask what the hell was happening, she blocked me. I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of this." "That's not why I'm calling." Her voice dropped lower. "Cameron, she's done this before." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, before she moved to Clearwater Bay, she was engaged to someone in Portland. Nice guy, architect like you, actually. She lived with him for 2 years, then suddenly left him for his business partner, cleaned out their savings, and moved here. I didn't know the full story until recently. His sister reached out to me last night after seeing Autumn's wedding posts. My grip tightened on the phone. Why didn't you tell me this before? I didn't know before. She told me she left Portland because of a bad breakup, but she never gave details. I assumed it was just a normal split. But his sister sent me court documents. Autumn was sued for theft and fraud. She settled out of court, and the guy agreed not to press charges if she paid him back and left the state. The room seemed to tilt slightly. She has a pattern. Yeah, and Cameron, there's more. The wellness studio thing? She pitched that same idea to her ex in Portland. He turned her down because the numbers didn't make sense, so she found someone else who'd say yes. Brody. I'm guessing he has no idea what he's gotten himself into. We talked for another 10 minutes. She sent me contact information for the ex in Portland, said he'd be willing to talk if I needed corroboration for legal proceedings. When we hung up, I added Valerie's information to the binder, opened a new section titled Pattern of Behavior. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't even just about Brody. This was who she was. A person who found stable, successful men and systematically dismantled their lives for her own benefit. I thought about the guy in Portland, wondered if he'd felt the same cold clarity when he finally saw the truth. Wondered if he'd also spent weeks cataloging evidence and building a case in silence. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. Cameron, I need you to tell me everything. Brody called me this morning saying the police came to their hotel asking questions. He's panicking. The police are investigating fraud allegations. That's all I can say right now. Fraud? Cameron, what is happening? Mom, I can't get into details, but you should know that Autumn and Brody used my name and assets fraudulently to secure a business loan. The bank is pressing charges. Silence. Then, quieter, Brody wouldn't do that. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe she manipulated him too, but either way it happened. He's your brother. I know. And when this is over, we'll deal with that. But right now, I have to protect myself. She didn't argue, just said she loved me and hung up. I set the phone down and walked out to the deck. The ocean was rougher today, whitecaps breaking against the rocks below, storm coming in from the west. I thought about Brody. Part of me, a small part, wondered if he really knew what Autumn had done, if maybe he was just another mark in her long con. But then I remembered his voice on the phone. You lose again. That wasn't ignorance. That was cruelty. Whatever happened next, he'd made his choice. And I'd made mine. Monday morning, I woke to an email from Douglas with the subject line, Preliminary findings, review immediately. I made coffee first. Strong, black, the kind that clears your head before you dive into bad news. Then I sat at my desk and opened the attachment. The document was thorough. 23 pages of legal analysis, financial tracking, and timeline reconstruction. Douglas had been busy over the weekend. The summary section outlined 3 distinct categories of fraud. First, the unauthorized depletion of joint assets totaling $62,318. Second, identity theft and forgery related to the business loan application. Third, and this one surprised me, fraudulent use of my contractor's license number on permit applications for the wellness studio renovations. I hadn't even known that last part. Apparently, she'd listed me as the licensed contractor, overseeing the build-out, which made me legally liable for any code violations or construction issues. My jaw clenched. Every time I thought I'd found the bottom of this, another layer revealed itself. I kept reading. Douglas had tracked the withdrawn funds. Most had gone into an account under Autumn's name only, but several large transfers had been made to vendors in Silver Pine Grove, a commercial real estate company, a construction firm, an interior designer. She'd been building her dream business with my money. There was a section titled Timeline Correlation that cross-referenced her text messages, bank transactions, and social media activity. It painted a clear picture. She'd started planning the wellness studio 8 months ago, right around the time she met Brody at some entrepreneur networking event I'd encouraged her to attend. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd pushed her to pursue her interests, to build something of her own, and she'd used that encouragement to construct my downfall. Douglas had also obtained records from the Portland case Valerie mentioned. The details were sealed, but the settlement agreement was public record. Autumn had paid back $38,000 to her ex and signed a statement agreeing to cease all contact and leave Oregon. The pattern was identical. Move in with a successful man, gain access to his resources, find a replacement, drain the accounts, and disappear. Only this time, she hadn't disappeared. She'd stayed local, thinking I was too passive to fight back. My phone rang. Isaac. Cam, you sitting down? Yeah, what's up? I did some digging into the wellness studio permits like you asked. Found something weird. There are invoices from 3 contractors for the same work. Looks like she was double and triple billing, pocketing the difference. How much are we talking? Rough estimate, about $40,000 in fraudulent invoicing. And here's the thing. All those invoices have your digital signature on them as the approving contractor. I closed my eyes. She forged my signature on fraudulent invoices. Looks that way. I forwarded everything to Douglas. This is beyond civil court now, Cam. This is serious criminal stuff. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a while. The house creaked around me, old wood settling, pipes humming. Normal sounds that felt surreal against the backdrop of systematic betrayal. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. Started compiling every single fraudulent action into one master document. Date, description, amount, evidence, file name. Row after row of calculated theft. By the time I finished, it was early afternoon and the spreadsheet had 72 entries. 72 separate acts of fraud, forgery, or theft across 8 months. I saved it as evidence master log and backed it up to 4 different locations. Then I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened social media. Autumn's accounts were public, probably to maximize the audience for her victory lap. The wedding photos were everywhere. Her in a cream-colored dress that probably cost $3,000. Brody in a navy suit looking pleased with himself. Comments from people congratulating them, calling them beautiful, saying they were meant to be. No one knew. None of these people had any idea what they were celebrating. I scrolled through her posts from the last few months. Motivational quotes about new beginnings and cutting toxic people from your life. Photos from Silver Pine Grove with captions about following your dreams. A picture of a green juice with the caption, "Fueling the Future." Every post was a performance, carefully curated to show a woman finding herself, leveling up, choosing happiness. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she was committing fraud on a massive scale. I took screenshots of every post that mentioned the wellness studio or referenced new beginnings, added them to the evidence folder with notes about corresponding financial transactions. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Steele? This is Agent Linda Washington with the FBI Economic Crimes Unit. I understand you've been working with local authorities regarding a fraud case. I'd like to discuss expanding that investigation. I sat up straighter. The FBI? When fraud crosses state lines and involves forged federal documents, it becomes a federal matter. Your contractor's license is federally recognized for certain types of commercial work. Using it fraudulently on federal grant applications, which we believe may have happened here, is a federal crime. Grant applications? The Wellness Studio applied for a small business grant through a federal program. Your name and license number are on that application. Did you authorize that? No, I had no knowledge of any grant application. That's what we suspected. I'm going to need you to come in for a formal interview. Can you make yourself available tomorrow? Yes. Should I bring my attorney? That would be advisable. We set a time, and she hung up. I immediately called Douglas. The FBI just contacted me. I know. I got a call 10 minutes ago. Cameron, this thing is bigger than we thought. If they're investigating grant fraud, we're talking potential prison time for whoever's responsible. How much prison time? Federal fraud? Could be anywhere from 5 to 20 years depending on the amounts involved. I let that sink in. 20 years. Autumn could be facing 20 years. Part of me felt sick. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the theft and the lies, I'd loved her once. The idea of her in prison for 2 decades felt disproportionate to what I'd imagined as consequences. But another part of me, the part that had been methodically building this case for weeks, knew that consequences weren't about revenge. They were about justice. About making sure she couldn't do this to someone else. Douglas, what's my exposure here? Could I be charged with anything? Not if you cooperate fully and your story holds up, which it will. You're a victim, not a co-conspirator. But you need to be completely transparent with the feds. No protecting Brody, no leaving anything out. I won't. That evening, I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town and rented a climate-controlled unit. Moved all the physical evidence there. The binder, the files, boxes of receipts and statements. Everything organized and cataloged. Not because I thought anyone would break into my house, but because I needed a secure backup. Somewhere fireproof, somewhere that could be accessed by authorities if needed. When I got home, it was almost dark. I made dinner, ate it without tasting it, and sat on the deck watching the sun sink into the ocean. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You're making a huge mistake. Drop this now, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, took a screenshot, forwarded it to Douglas and Detective Morrison. Then I blocked the number and set my phone down. Threats now. We'd reached the desperation phase. I thought about responding, thought about saying something cutting or clever. But Douglas's advice echoed in my head. Don't engage. Don't give them ammunition. So I did nothing. Just sat there in the growing darkness, listening to waves crash against rocks, and waited. Because that's what this whole thing had taught me. Patience isn't passive. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait while other people destroy themselves. And that's exactly what was happening. Every threatening text, every false report, every desperate move they made just added more evidence to the pile. I didn't need to fight them. I just needed to document while they fought themselves. By the time I went to bed that night, I had 3 more threatening messages forwarded to law enforcement, a meeting scheduled with the FBI, and a strange sense of peace. Not because I was winning, but because I'd stopped playing their game entirely. I was playing a different game now, one with rules and evidence and legal structures. And in that game, I was exactly where I needed to be. 10 steps ahead, just like always. The FBI interview took place in a bland conference room on the 3rd floor of a federal building in downtown Clearwater Bay. Agent Washington was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and a handshake that meant business. Her partner, Agent Torres, was older, quiet, the kind of person who watched and absorbed everything. Douglas sat beside me. We'd spent the morning reviewing every document, every timeline, making sure our story was airtight. "Mr. Steele," Agent Washington began, sliding a folder across the table. "Thank you for coming in. I want to be clear from the start, you're not under investigation. You're a witness and a victim. But we need your full cooperation to build the case against Ms. Freeman and potentially others." "I understand. Let's start with the grant application. When did you first learn your contractor's license had been used?" "Saturday. My business partner found invoices with my forged signature. That led us to discover the license number had been used on multiple documents I never authorized." Agent Torres opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "Is this your signature?" I looked at the screen. It was a scan of a federal small business grant application. My name, my license number, my supposed signature at the bottom. That's not my signature. It's close. But the capital S in Steele is wrong. I loop it differently, and I never sign documents without dating them beside my name. This has no date. Washington made a note. The grant was approved for $85,000. The money was deposited into an account for Ember and Oak Wellness, LLC. Were you aware this company existed? Not until last week. Are you listed as a partner or owner? No, at least not to my knowledge. Torres pulled up another document. According to the articles of incorporation filed in Silver Pine Grove, you're listed as a silent partner with a 30% stake. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I never signed anything. Douglas leaned forward. We'll need copies of those incorporation documents. If his name is on them without his consent, that's identity theft. Already being processed, Washington said. Mr. Steele, I need you to walk me through your relationship with Autumn Freeman. How long were you together? What financial entanglements existed? When did you first suspect something was wrong? I spent the next 2 hours detailing everything. The joint account, the suspicious withdrawals, the Vegas wedding, the loan application, the threatening messages. Douglas occasionally interjected with legal clarifications, but mostly I just talked. They asked about Brody, what I knew about his involvement, whether I thought he was complicit or manipulated. Honestly, I don't know, I said. Part of me thinks she used him like she used me, but he called me the night before the wedding specifically to gloat. That doesn't sound like someone who's being manipulated. That sounds like someone who thinks they won. Washington nodded. We'll be interviewing him separately. If he cooperates and provides evidence against Miss Freeman, he might avoid charges. If he doesn't, he's facing the same penalty she is. What kind of penalties are we talking about? Federal wire fraud, identity theft, grant fraud. We're looking at 10 to 20 years minimum, possibly more depending on what else we uncover. The room felt suddenly smaller. 20 years. Even after everything, that number hit differently when spoken out loud by a federal agent. There's something else, Torres said, pulling up a new file. We've identified 2 other men in different states who filed similar complaints about Miss Freeman. One in Oregon, which you already know about. Another in Colorado from 5 years ago. She's been doing this for a while. How many people has she done this to? That we know of, 3 including you. But we suspect there may be more who never reported it. I sat back in my chair, processing that information. I wasn't special. I wasn't even unique. I was just the latest in a series of marks. After the interview concluded, Douglas and I walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. We sat outside despite the cold, both needing air and space. You did well in there, Douglas said. I feel like I just signed her death warrant. You didn't do this, Cameron. She did. You're just telling the truth. I know, but it doesn't feel good. It's not supposed to. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass by, normal people doing normal things. Going to work, meeting friends, living lives uncomplicated by fraud investigations and federal charges. My phone buzzed. A call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Cameron. It was Brody. His voice sounded different, strained. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just give me 10 minutes, face to face. I'll come to you. I looked at Douglas. He shook his head firmly. I can't do that, Brody. Cameron, I'm drowning here. The FBI came to our hotel. They took Autumn in for questioning 3 hours ago. She won't tell me what's happening. Our lawyer says I need to cooperate, but I don't even know what I'm cooperating with. Please, I'm your brother. Something in his voice cracked. Not the smug confidence from before. Actual fear. Where are you right now? Silver Pine Grove. At the hotel. Stay there. I'll meet you in the lobby in an hour. But my lawyer will be with me, and I'm recording everything. Fine, thank you. I hung up and looked at Douglas. I have to do this. You really don't. He's my brother, and maybe he can provide information that helps the case. Douglas sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you, and we're treating this as a witness interview, not a family reunion. We drove to Silver Pine Grove in Douglas's car. The hotel was nice, one of those boutique places that tries too hard to look rustic. Exposed beams, Edison bulbs, reclaimed wood everywhere. Brody was waiting in the lobby, sitting on a leather couch that probably cost more than most people's cars. He looked terrible. Hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He stood when he saw me, started to extend his hand, then thought better of it. Thanks for coming. Let's make this quick. What do you want to tell me? We sat in a corner away from other guests. Douglas positioned himself where he could see both of us, phone out, recording. I didn't know, Brody started, about the fraud, the forged signatures, any of it. She told me you guys had broken up months ago, that the joint account was hers from a settlement you agreed to, that you were supportive of the wellness studio and wanted to help but preferred to stay anonymous. And you believed that? Why wouldn't I? She had documents, bank statements, everything looked legitimate. So the call you made to me, the one where you said I lose again, that was what exactly? He had the decency to look ashamed. That was me being an idiot. She kept saying you were controlling, that you'd try to sabotage her new life. I thought I was protecting her from you. By gloating? I know how it sounds. Cameron, I'm sorry, I really am. I thought I was winning something, proving something. I didn't realize I was being used. I studied his face, looking for tells. He seemed genuine. But then again, Autumn had seemed genuine too. The FBI says you're listed as co-owner of the wellness studio, that you signed loan documents and grant applications. I signed what she put in front of me. She said it was standard LLC paperwork. Did you read any of it? Not really. I trusted her. Douglas leaned forward. Mr. Steele, did you knowingly participate in forging your brother's signature or using his identity on any legal documents? No. God, no, I didn't even know his name was on anything until yesterday. Did Miss Freeman ever discuss using Cameron's assets or credentials to secure funding? Brody hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. She might have mentioned something about using his reputation to strengthen our application, but she made it sound like you'd agreed to be a reference. A reference is different from forging someone's signature on federal documents, Douglas said flatly. I know that now. I stood up. Brody, I want to believe you didn't know. Part of me actually does believe it. But you still participated. You still benefited from fraud even if you didn't realize it was fraud. What do? You cooperate with the FBI. You tell them everything Autumn told you, every document she showed you, every conversation about money or the business. You turn over your phone, your laptop, your files, and you accept whatever consequences come from that. Will I go to prison? I don't know. That's between you and the federal prosecutor. He looked like he might cry. The little brother I used to protect from bullies, the one I taught to ride a bike, now sitting in a hotel lobby facing potential prison time for trusting the wrong person. For what it's worth, I said, I hope you didn't know. I hope she manipulated you as much as she manipulated me. Because the alternative means you deliberately helped destroy your own brother's life for a woman you barely knew. I didn't know, Cam, I swear. Then prove it. Cooperate. Tell the truth. And maybe we can salvage something from this mess. We left him there, drove back to Clearwater Bay in silence. Halfway home, Douglas said, Do you believe him? I don't know. Does it matter? For the case, no. For you personally, maybe. I stared out the window at the darkening sky. He's still my brother. That has to count for something. Even after everything? Especially after everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I went for a walk on the beach. The sand was cold, the wind sharp. The ocean roared in the darkness, waves I couldn't see but could feel in the vibration beneath my feet. I thought about family, about trust, about how the people closest to you can hurt you most because you never see it coming. My phone buzzed. A text from Valerie. Autumn was arrested an hour ago. Saw it on the news. Are you okay? I stared at that message for a long time before responding. I'm okay, thank you for checking. But I wasn't okay. Not really. Because even though justice was happening, even though the system was working, I felt hollow. I'd spent weeks building a case, documenting everything, staying 10 steps ahead, and I'd won. The evidence was overwhelming, the law was on my side, consequences were coming. But winning felt empty when the prize was watching people you once cared about face prison time. I walked until my feet hurt, until the sky started lightening in the east, until exhaustion finally outweighed the thoughts spinning in my head. Then I went home, showered, and tried to remember what normal felt like. The formal charges came down 3 weeks later. I was in my office reviewing blueprints for a community center project when Douglas called. It's done. Federal grand jury indicted Autumn Freeman on 14 counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and grant fraud. Brody was charged with 3 counts of conspiracy and fraud, but they're offering him a deal if he testifies. I set down my pen. What kind of deal? 2 years probation and restitution instead of prison time. He'd have to plead guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, pay back his share of the fraudulent funds, and testify against Autumn in trial. Will he take it? His lawyer would be insane not to advise him to. Cameron, she's facing up to 30 years now. They added charges after finding evidence she'd done this in 2 other states. The Colorado case, another one in Arizona we didn't know about. She's a serial fraudster. 30 years. I couldn't process that number. It seemed impossible that the woman I'd shared a bed with, made breakfast for, talked about futures with, could spend the next 3 decades in prison. When's the trial? 6 months, maybe longer. These things take time. But the evidence is overwhelming. Her own lawyer is probably advising her to take a plea deal. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, just staring at the blueprints in front of me. Clean lines, structural integrity, everything measured and intentional. That's what I understood. Not chaos, not betrayal, Not the kind of calculated deception that destroys lives for profit. My phone rang again. This time it was Agent Washington. Mr. Steele, I wanted to personally thank you for your cooperation. Your documentation made this case substantially easier to prosecute. Most victims don't keep the kind of records you maintained. I guess I'm methodical by nature. That methodical nature probably saved you from worse outcomes. If you hadn't frozen those accounts when you did, she likely would have taken everything. Agent Washington, can I ask you something? Of course. How does someone become this? She wasn't born a con artist. What happened? There was a pause. I've been investigating financial crimes for 12 years. The truth is, most fraudsters start small. A little lie here, a manipulated truth there. They get away with it, and it escalates. By the time we catch them, they've usually been doing it so long they don't remember how to be honest. Do they ever change? Rarely. The recidivism rate for fraud is higher than almost any other crime. They're addicted to the game, not even the money. Just the thrill of getting away with it. After she hung up, I walked through the house. It felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been removed from the walls themselves. I'd changed the furniture around, repainted the guest room, donated most of the things she'd left behind, made the space mine again. But there were still traces. A coffee mug in the back of the cupboard. A book on the shelf I'd never read, but she'd insisted we buy. Small ghosts that would probably never fully disappear. My phone buzzed with a text from Isaac. Drinks tonight. You've been hermiting for weeks. I almost said no, but something made me say yes. We met at a bar downtown, the kind of place with good beer and better music. Isaac was already there when I arrived, 2 IPAs waiting at a corner table. You look like you haven't slept in a month, he said by way of greeting. Probably because I haven't. The case? Wrapped up. She was indicted. Brody's taking a deal. It's over. Isaac raised his glass. To justice? I clinked my glass against his, but didn't drink right away. Is it justice, though, or is it just consequences? There's a difference. I think so. Justice implies balance, fairness, things being made right, but nothing about this feels right. She's going to prison. Brody's life is destroyed. I got my money back, but I lost 3 years and a brother. You didn't lose anything, Cam. She took it. There's a difference. We drank in silence for a while, watching other people in the bar laugh and flirt and live uncomplicated lives. You know what the weird part is? I said eventually. I'm not even angry anymore. I was for a while, but now I just feel tired. That's normal. You've been in crisis mode for weeks. Your body's finally realizing the threat is over. Maybe. Isaac leaned back in his chair. Can I say something you're not going to like? When has that ever stopped you? You did everything right. You documented, you stayed calm, you let the system work. But at some point, you're going to have to actually process what happened. Not as a case, not as evidence, but as a betrayal by someone you loved. I stared into my beer. I know. When? I don't know. Not yet. We finished our drinks and walked out into the cool night. The street was busy. People spilling out of restaurants and shops, living their Tuesday evening lives. You want to know the really messed up part? I said as we reached our cars. Part of me still hopes she gets help. That maybe prison will force her to confront whatever broken thing inside her makes her do this to people. That's not messed up. That's human. Or stupid. Sometimes those are the same thing. I drove home along the coastal road, windows down, salt air rushing in. The ocean was dark beside me, just the sound of waves and the occasional flash of foam in my headlights. When I got home, there was an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it standing in the doorway. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter. Cameron, I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I'm pleading guilty. No trial, no dragging you through testimony, no more lies. My lawyer says I'll probably get 15 years. I'll be 52 when I get out. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. I'm sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry. Not for getting caught. For becoming someone who could do what I did to you. You deserve better. Autumn. I read it 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all I found were words. I walked inside, set the letter on the kitchen counter, and made myself tea. Stood at the window watching the dark ocean, thinking about forgiveness and justice and the long road between them. My phone buzzed. A text from Brody. I signed the plea deal. I'll be testifying next month for sentencing recommendations. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was stupid and arrogant and I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see what I did now. I'm sorry, brother. I stared at that message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on one. I know. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. Because that's all I had to give right now. I finished my tea, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in months, I fell asleep quickly. And I didn't dream about any of it. Spring arrived in Clearwater Bay with the kind of gentle insistence that makes you believe in new beginnings. The trial had concluded 2 months ago. Autumn pleaded guilty and received 14 years. Brody completed his probation requirements and moved to Seattle. We exchanged occasional texts, brief and polite, but the brotherhood we once had felt like something from another lifetime. I stood on my back deck watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and rose. The coffee in my hands was hot, strong, exactly how I liked it. The house behind me was quiet but not empty. It felt lived in again, mine in a way it hadn't been since before Autumn moved in. Last month, I donated the chess set I'd been holding on to. Not the one from the guest room, but a vintage set my grandfather had given me years ago. It went to the community center, where I'd been volunteering on weekends, teaching architecture basics to teenagers interested in design. One of the students, a sharp 17-year-old named Jordan, had asked me why I chose architecture. Because I like building things that last, I'd said. Things with solid foundations that won't collapse when tested. Jordan had nodded thoughtfully. Like trust? Yeah, I'd replied, exactly like trust. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaac asking if I wanted to grab lunch. I replied yes and set the phone down. The business was thriving. We'd landed 3 major contracts in the last quarter, including a sustainable housing project I'd been pursuing for years. Work felt purposeful again, not just a distraction from personal chaos. I walked back inside and grabbed my keys. On the way out, I paused at the small table in the hallway where I used to keep Autumn's things. Now it held a framed photo of my grandfather and me standing in front of this house the summer before he died. His hand on my shoulder, both of us grinning at something off camera. You taught me to build things right, I whispered to the photo. Turns out that applies to more than just houses. I drove into town with the windows down, breathing in salt air and possibility. The investigation, the trial, all of it felt distant now. Not forgotten, but filed away in the part of my memory reserved for lessons learned rather than wounds still bleeding. At a red light, I noticed a woman crossing the street pushing a stroller, laughing at something her partner said. Normal life. Simple happiness. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of wanting that again someday. Not now. Not soon. But someday. The light turned green. I drove forward. Because that's what you do after surviving a storm. You don't stand in the wreckage forever cataloging damage. You clean up. You rebuild. You move forward. And eventually, slowly, you remember what peace feels like. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of solid ground beneath your feet. I'd built my case carefully. Now I was building my life the same way. One deliberate step at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.